Good afternoon, everyone. Now that we have officially started, I just want to welcome you all and hope that you all will enjoy the proceedings. There should be some interesting ones coming on. There's some great speakers who will be here and some lovely poets, and we should all enjoy today. It's been a quick put together, but it's going to be, as usual, quite interesting. So enjoy the evening, the afternoon, I should say. Thank you all.
Thanks then, Natalie. That's wonderful. That's Natalie Fagan-Brown, who's the chairman of the North Wales Jamaica Society. We're really, really pleased that you're able to be with us, Natalie. I know things health-wise haven't been too good recently, but it's really, really good to see you looking fantastic and very regal, I have to say. I'm Liz Millman and I'm Secretary of the North Wales Jamaica Society, and I'm going to co-host this event along with Yasser Safari. Yasser has joined us from Jamaica. He is very experienced at doing this sort of thing, so I'm just relying on his support as co-host. So I'm just going to pass over to you for a moment, Yasser.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Good morning to everyone again, and welcome to the people just joining us, such as Caroline Sampson and the others who might just be joining us when we're not here in the chit chat. And since I'm a co-host who Liz claims is good at these things, I'll correct her first by correcting her name. Last time I checked, she's Liz Mill Woman. And Natalie Fagan, though she might not mind, isn't she? Women have come such a long way in these days, so they deserve to be chairwoman if it's a woman, and then a man be a chairman. We don't need to lend our gender to everyone else. We are drifting apart from this patriarchal society into one that is balanced with our women and our children. So you know, just on a friendly correction there. I'm Yasser Safari. I'm, among other things, a poet, author, social advocate, the founder of the Jamaica Poetry Festival, which comes up on Sunday, August 8th, as well as the Poetry in Motion, among a few other things. Today, we are here to recognize the people who have been traumatized by the Windrush experience, the people who were left behind. Dr. Hicklin will speak to that as well. The contribution that has been made to the British society, albeit in my opinion, not quite deserving. However, it is what it is. We are here to build bridges and to heal and to reconcile and to move forward with our shared humanity. And so we are here being critical and analytical, but in that spirit of the unity of the human community. And so I'm delighted to be here on this occasion and to co-host with a partner in good deeds, Liz Millwoman, formerly Liz Millman of Learning Links International, as well as the other organizations that were alluded to and will be alluded to over time. So brilliant to see everyone. We give thanks. It's a good gathering and it's a good look and it's a good song. And so we hope we can help to identify the silver lining behind the dark clouds. The dark cloud evident in Liz and the challenges she has been going through, as well as all of us in a moment in time in history that will not easily be forgotten. But we have to rally. We have to look out for each other, hold each other's hand. We are doing this against the backdrop of the Windrush debacle, I would like to call it. However, we are resilient people. We have the human spirit that is triumphant. And so we hope that this will help in that process and that experience as well. So we can find this silver lining so that we can keep shining. Give thanks, Liz. Great to be here. Forward to you again.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, Yasser Safari. It's a great honor always to work with you, and I really appreciate the way you've introduced the session today. Now I'm going to pass over to Dr. Lola Ramakan, who is looking absolutely fantastic in her Ready for Windruch outfit. Great. That's fantastic.
And you haven't seen my bag.
Wow.
Oh. With my scarf.
Liz and Kali.
I can tie it over my head.
sorry, Liz and colleagues, I would like to crave your indulgence that
Yes.
after Dr. Ramakan speaks, that if I could be put on early because I have a 3-year-old. My sister is on duty, but he is going to be moving in and out. So I hope I can be early on the program so I can relieve my sister because he's quite a handful. So let me just ask if that is possible.
That's
Okay.
very flexible with the way that we go through, but try and go through as quickly as possible. Can I just say before Lola that you speak, we're going to produce an ebook of conference papers, and that's where you're really going to be able to tell your stories. And we can also record longer presentations to use as clips if people want. But for the purposes of today, we just want people to keep to 5 to 10 minutes just to introduce your story or to perform your poem. And we've invited our poets in to this conference because poetry is such an important way to tell the stories. So yes, Hilary, I'll arrange that. Okay, thanks very much.
No,
Then. So,
I know that is out of the way. We are introducing Dr. Lola Ramakan the Gorgeous. Yeah, muted. Could you unmute her, please? She's muted.
Mute, right.
Am I okay now?
Yes, you're
Yes,
fine
you
now.
are.
Okay.
Dr. Lola Ramakan the Gorgeous.
Yeah, it is such a pleasure to be in attendance at this remarkable conference. I feel connected in name, body, spirit, and soul, and is very happy to bring you the message from His Excellency Seth George Ramokan, High Commissioner of Jamaica to the United Kingdom, on the occasion of the North Wales Jamaica Windrush Conference, June 20, 2021. Let me salute the conference host and co-hosts, Liz and Yassafarai, and Mrs. Natalie Fagan Brown, who is the president of the Jamaica North Wales Alliance, Dr. Hilary Robert Hicklin, Dr. Jim, Professor Robert Moore, Dr. Al Shabazz, Mr. Levi and Neil Lauren, Miss Karen Cross, and Miss Hilary Brown, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I bring you now the High Commissioner's message. I would like to thank the North Wales Jamaica Society for their kind invitation to your Windrush Day Conference 2021, and to thank my wife, Dr. Lola Ramakan, for kindly agreeing to deliver this message on my behalf. My wife and I continue to be mesmerized about our historic 3-day visit to Wales in August 2018 at the invitation of the Learning Links International to deepen our understanding of the shared history and the many strands that link Jamaica and Wales. We cannot help but take a moment to recognize and thank Liz Millman, Director of Learning Links International, who made this visit possible. Since then, the Jamaica-Wales Alliance and the Jamaica High Commission have collaborated to engage organizations in Wales and Jamaica toward meaningful civic projects. Now, you stated in your invitation, and I quote, the aim of the Windrush Day Conference 2021 is to share stories, to raise awareness of the significant contributions made by members of the Windrush generation, promoting the historical, economic, and cultural contributions. And then I saw that the time allotted is 5 to 10 minutes. So I said to myself, this is impossible. There is so much to say about contributions made by the Windrush generation it would take me days. So in the interest of time, I've decided to give just 2 examples. Did you know that the midwife who delivered both Prince George and Princess Charlotte is a member of the Windrush generation? Yes, Jacqueline Dunkley Bent, OBE, a Jamaican, was responsible for 2 of this century's royal births. Jacqueline is the head of maternity, children, and young people at the NHS England, and her academic research into healthcare has been nationally and internationally influential. She exemplifies the integral contribution that Black nurses have made to the NHS ever since its inception. The Chief Midwifery Officer is the most senior midwife in England who provides professional, strategic, and clinical leadership to colleagues working across the country. Her experience has equipped her to lead on strategic boards where she influences healthcare nationally and internationally through extensive research and education. She produces publication and is frequently the main speaker at national and international conferences. Recently, she pioneered the digital Red Book given to parents when they have a baby. The Chief Midwifery Officer is the most senior midwife in England. She provides professional, strategic, and clinical leadership to colleagues working across the country. And what if I told you that the inventor of the barley abrasion process used to brew Guinness and other such beverages is a member of the Windrush generation? Yes, Professor Sir Jeff Palmer, CD, renowned scientist and human rights activist of Jamaican heritage, was this inventor. In 1989, Sir Jeff became Scotland's first Black professor and has had a long association with the university. This began when he completed his PhD in grain science and technology jointly with Herod Watt College and the University of Edinburgh in the 1960s. He went on to a successful research career in Surrey before moving back to Harriet Watt University in 1977, where he worked until his retirement in 2005. During that time, Sir Jeff invented the barley abrasion process, the success of which attracted funding to establish the International Center for Brewing and Distilling as a part of the Harriet Watt campus in Edinburgh. Following this retirement, he earned the academic title of Professor Emeritus. Sir Jeff was knighted in the 2014 New Year's Honor for service to human rights, science, and charity. In 2018, he was appointed Jamaica's first honorary consul in Scotland and is the 2020 recipient of the Jamaican National Honor, the Order of Distinction, CD Commander Class. Professor Dunkley and Professor Palmer are members of the Windrush generation. On May 28, 1948, 492 Jamaicans boarded the Empire Windrush destined for England. These Windrush passengers were invited, and I emphasize, were invited by the British government to participate in the rebuilding of post-war Britain. Passengers with no place to stay were offered shelter in the underground air raid shelter Clapham South, a couple of miles from Cold Harbor Road, Brixton. Over a period of 70 plus years in Britain, the Windrush generation endured physical and mental hardships, including hostile immigration policies and confrontations with rioters in Birmingham, Nottingham, Notting Hill, and other types of unfriendly and racist behavior. Despite these setbacks, the Windrush generation, being of diverse backgrounds, faiths, educational attainment, experience, and skill, vastly exceeded expectation. These women and men from Caribbean and African countries became the backbone of the manufacturing industry, the NHS, and public transport, undertaking menial, dirty, heavy lifting, and dangerous but essential work. Many who had attained educational and professional qualifications introduced during British rules were denied access to consumerate employment and higher education. Notwithstanding the hardship, the Windrush generation settled and developed communities in and around factories and hospitals in accessible and affordable but very poor accommodation. Soon, they were able to send for loved ones, children, family, and friends. Some found friendships and marriages with local men and women. They persevere, raise family, build strong friendships and relationships, form independent places to worship, and develop socially, culturally, and politically. With the aid of the partner scheme and later high street banks, many were able to purchase properties to secure family and friends until they too could get a mortgage. Their resilience to cope with the social and cultural challenges can be attributed to the bonding and support of family and community, which gave them a sense of identity and belonging. Their unspoken culture, it takes a community to raise a child, coupled with their Christian faith, gave them the courage and will to endure. Today, their presence is found in all areas of life, in British life, including arts, sports, culture, diverse businesses, faith, politics, military, police, education, academia, health, medicine, and social care. The Windrush generation has indeed left an enduring mark across the canvas of the United Kingdom, enabling continued development in Britain and Jamaica. As I close, the Windrush generation has made a solid contribution to a progressive, multicultural Britain since the World Wars, and particularly over the last 70-odd years since Windrush wave of migrants. Professor Jacqueline Dunkley and Professor Sir Jeff Palmer are but an infinitesimal example of the enduring contribution of the Windrush generation to the development and well-being of the United Kingdom and their homelands. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed. That was really, really moving. Karen? Oh, I think a round of applause for that, a round of applause. That's lovely. Really wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. And please thank your husband, the Jamaican High Commissioner, His Excellency Seth George Ramakan, for those very kind words, but very informative words, which really give a very good background to what we're about today. And that is recognising the great contribution that the Windrush generation have made in the UK. So thank you very much indeed, Dr. Ramakan, and thank you for all the endeavours and hard work you're doing with the North Wales Jamaica Society to create the Penance Project Committee. And we very much look forward to getting that off the ground and moving that very exciting and important project forward. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so Hilary's put a special request. So Hilary, over to you for to introduce a very interesting topic that you're going to be following up with us. So if you can take maybe five minutes or so, just to introduce.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And
Good morning,
if I may
everyone.
interject, sorry, Dr. Hicklin, if I may interject here, in presenting Dr. Hicklin, we'd like to reflect on some of the things that Dr. Ramakan said, and essentially, I think the people in the Windrush experience were more lured and tricked into the country, and that is why it is important what Dr. Hicklin is saying, the trauma of the people left behind must not be forgotten as well. Dr. Hicklin.
Thank you very much. On this Father's Day, we praise Jamaican fathers and fathers in general, and we recognize the many challenges that are being faced. We know that in my case, this is the second year that my husband of many decades, Fred Hickling, is now an ancestor. So let me focus briefly on where the people who went to Britain came from. We often talk about what happened in Britain, but we rarely speak about what happened in Jamaica and the other countries from which the 492 people left on the 24th of May. I'm told that they left Victoria Pier, but I have not verified that information because I believe we need to have something that marks the names of all of the people who left, other than the ship's manifest. So I have been thinking about the best way of thinking about this. And one of the things I came up with was the idea of Homer and the Odyssey. And Homer in this case now is, I'm going to call him, I hope I get his name right, Sheku Rani Mason. Can you believe that somebody who was born in Northampton of an Antiguan father and a Sierra Leonese mother, his passport was denied? And this then says to me that the Windrush is only a part of a long story, a story which seems to be never ending, in which people are displaced, in which there is a question of their citizenship and matters of belonging. So it didn't matter that he had played at Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's wedding, and it didn't matter if he has won international awards, and it doesn't matter if he's one of the Black families that has been excelling. When the Home Office was ready, they denied his passport. What a disaster, a debacle. And so I recognize that this is an ongoing process, that we just can't take our foot off the pedal. Because, and I just want to say a few things, in spite of the contribution that people make or where they're born, the fact that we have hostile conditions which have been in place for centuries means that we actually have to call it out and address them in 2021. 2021, 1948, whatever it is. So this young man, Sheku Rani Mason, would be the great grandson of some of the people who would have gone on that journey. And he is still having a problem. So two other matters that come from that. The Odyssey of Homer was what struck in my mind. Homer's long journey and all of the problems that Homer faced in terms of Greek mythology. And so I'm going to be following that up. This journey is really, really, really one that can break people. However, many people are able to overcome because of their resilience, because of their faith, because of their backgrounds. And we need to spend some time helping people to develop that mental toughness that copes with this situation. So that's one thing, two things. The third thing is, what happened to the people who were left behind? I recognize, for example, that I have paid at least 3 trips to Wales. So the first time we went to Aberystwyth, where my mother, who was an academic at UWI, was at the library school in Aberystwyth. I'm sorry, my Welsh pronunciations are not really up to speed, so you'll have to forgive me. And another time we spent time in Cardiff. And another time we went to the festival in Hay on Wye. And I want to make it clear that to people who are coming from the colonial world, that we knew a lot about. There was a textbook called The British Isles, which I had to learn about in school. And so we know a lot more about Britain than Britain knew about us. In fact, a colleague introducing me to his friend, a person who taught me in school, and let me not say an Englishman, he was an Irish born in Birmingham. And then he was introducing me to a friend, and the friend said, "What is your name?" And I said, "Hilary Robertson." And he looked perplexed. And I said, "Didn't you realize that the slaves, the people enslaved had the names of the slavers?" And he said, "No." So that's a second issue about the lack of knowledge held by those on the British mainland about the people in the colonial world and the need for bridge building, according to Yassus this morning. The third thing I wanted to say is that we are really going to have to resolve some of these problems because the world is getting smaller, as we can see with all kinds of things happening, like global warming, like the pandemic, like all sorts of things. And we're gonna have to find a way to work together. We can't be working apart. We need to work together. We learn to build mutual respect and those kinds of things. So I want to say in closing that there is need for more information, and I'm very happy about the work that Liz has been doing. I want to encourage people, all kinds of people, to do what you can do. My husband and I have spent quite a long time looking at issues of migrant mental health. And one of the things that improves people's mental health is a sense of belonging. They want to be part of something bigger than themselves. And there is nothing wrong. There is somebody, you can be both Jamaican and Welsh, as your North Wales Society demonstrates. One can have dual citizenship. One can be committed to 2 countries. Most importantly, we really have to be committed to the global improvement because it's one world. And I know there's some who are going after Mars, but they're going after Mars, but they're not dealing with what's going on next door in their countries and in the world. So I want to use, as I said, the metaphor of the Odyssey as part of this journey. I want to say that we need to do a lot of work in Jamaica about what happened to the people, their families, and their communities, because many people had intended to stay for 4 years and instead they stayed for 40. And it was very difficult for many of them to find the money and to beat the immigration rules that constantly change to take their families. So we had a lot of families which have gone through grief. And the last point I want to make is I am encouraging and encouraged by this morning because I think we just have to work on. Thank you.
You're most welcome.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Hilary Robertson Hickling. Hilary's been kind enough to join our Black History Lunchtime Conversations as we begin to together explore some of the points that Hilary was raising there. That's really, really important. So Hilary, thank you very much indeed for that. And now I'm going to ask Neil Lawrence. Neil has a, Neil, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
This is wonderful. Neil lives near Newtown in Wales. And I met Neil's brother, Levi Lawrence, over here in Melbourne. Levi teaches over here. And I learned that Levi and Neil's father was actually one of the Windrush passengers. And with our Welsh connections, we felt it only proper to hear a little of the story. So I think you're going to, I'm just going to work on the share a screen thing. So I do the share a screen and then, no, that's my screen now. How did you do it before, Neil?
Oh, I will share. I'll just say a few words and then I will share.
That's fine, thank you. So
Okay,
over to you.
I will say good afternoon, everyone. It's afternoon here in mid Wales. I know some of you are in different time zones. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you. Just by way of introduction, yes, I'm based here in Mid Wales, and since 2007, my wife and myself have been running a business called Creative Workshops Unlimited, where we do cultural diversity workshops in schools. So we've worked in schools in England and schools, you know, in Wales, and we do sessions for children. We also do sessions for teachers as well, and usually they find our sessions quite challenging and eye-opening, and with much learning, you know, from what we do. So this afternoon, what I'd like to do is just to share a few slides from one of the presentations that we do. It's called the Windrush and Britishness, and it's kind of focused on my father's experience coming over on the Windrush and some of the things that he faced when he came here. So I'll share my screen, and just bear in mind, this is actually what I share with the children. This presentation is for the older children, say Key Stage 2 upwards to secondary age children. So you can just get a little snippet of what we're doing in the schools.
I'm not sure how we make our pictures smaller. It's interesting. View options. Let's have a look at this view options up here. Fit into.
Okay, so let me just go back. Okay, just bear with me. Okay, so the Windrush pioneers and Britishness, and as you can see in the background.
Neil, excuse me. It isn't coming as a full screen on my view. What about other people? Just unmute yourself and tell me. Can you see the full?
Yes,
image?
full screen.
Yes, it's okay, my end, Liz.
I can see the full screen, yes.
Yeah.
Then thank you.
Yes, so the Windrush pioneers and Britishness, and in the background you can see a picture of the Windrush, and we have the Union Jack on the right, and you can see how it's changing, and we just conveying to the children that the Britain that the Windrush pioneers came to is not the same as Britain today. Britain has changed quite a lot, and we're just kind of illustrating this through the changes there in the flag. We're saying it's still Britain, but it's not the same Britain. Things have moved on significantly. We share this thought here, and you can think about this for yourself. This is, of course, in the British context. Are we actually treating other cultures, immigrants, better today than we did in the past? Yes, are things better today? And it's interesting when I put this out to the children, they usually say yes. They don't obviously know a lot of what has happened, but there's a general sense that yes, things are better. We don't do things that we used to do in the past. But when I take them a bit further, it allows them to think a bit deeper on the matter, and perhaps there are still issues that need to be addressed in terms of how other cultures and immigrant people are treated when they come to this country today. So just a little bit about my dad's experiences. Oops, sorry. I'm going to play a little clip from the interview that he gave to the BBC about his experience coming on the Windrush. He's going to start by just saying a little bit about when he was at school in Jamaica, and then he's going to come to his experience coming over on the Windrush.
Sorry, George. George. The charger.
Please mute Dr. Ramakan.
Neil, are you hearing it?
Oh, sorry. Sorry, are you hearing the recording?
No, I'm not.
No.
Oh,
No,
okay. All right. Sorry about that. I was assuming that everybody was hearing. Right. I think I'm not sure. Oh, just bear with me. There's one thing I would just let me just see something. Can you hear it now?
No, unfortunately not.
no,
No.
no.
No, if that counts.
Okay, well,
Unanimous no, Neil.
Neil, you've switched your mute off as well.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear?
No,
No.
No.
No, you couldn't hear.
No.
All right. I was assuming that it would, because it's actually a part of the presentation, so I was assuming that it would just play. So I'm not sure. Just bear with me. Let me just check something.
Technical things. We're all getting so much better at being able to use Zoom. But there's always a moment when some bright idea you have doesn't work out. Not consistent.
Let me just try it now.
We practiced this beforehand and it seemed okay then. But we didn't try this sound bit. While Neil's just
Can you
sorting it out, just to say that Neil's dad, Daniel, was interviewed
No?
by the BBC. No.
No.
Okay.
In the 80s, and this was
All right then. So I think I'll just move through it then, and perhaps another time we could come back with the recording, Liz.
that will be beautiful. Thank you so much.
Right, so just bear with me. Right. Okay, so yes, well, let me just summarize what he was saying. He was talking about his education in Jamaica and how it was very similar to the education that was here in Britain. And many of the things that he studied at school were to do, were within the British kind of context. So when he came to this country, he had certain ideas and expectations about this country because of his, what he calls his English education that he received in Jamaica. He then, oops. All right.
We have lost.
He then goes on to.
Oh, this is great to have the photographs to be able to see and remind us how it really looked.
Yeah, sorry, there. I'm just going to have to come out of this because I've come back in. It's just the sound was still playing on my side, but let me go back in. Yeah, so he basically talks through his experience of coming on the boat and sort of why he came and what it was like, coming over. He talks about the day that he arrived. It was June the 21st, and he expected it to be warmer than it was. It was quite cold, he said. So these are some of the things that he shares. So these are just some pictures. You might be familiar with these from some of the Windrush passengers.
Oh, this is lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, I haven't identified him in any of the pictures. Yeah. So I'm just going to share a little bit about some of the experiences that he had, and some of you will be familiar with these kind of experiences. Of course, he was coming here to work, and here is a picture of him at work. But as you may know, it wasn't always easy for people like my dad coming over at that time to get jobs. And he said sometimes jobs would be advertised. He would go for the job and they would say, sorry, we don't have a job going. And then later on, he would find out that there was actually a job there. And he took it that because of his color, he wasn't offered the job. And sometimes as well, it was not necessarily the employer, but sometimes there was a concern that the other employees wouldn't be happy with having like a Black person working there. Yeah. Here is a picture of him with some friends. And you can see that picture of the Queen there when she was quite young. So it gives you an idea when this is going back to. One day he was out with another Black friend. So it was two Black men and they were walking across a park and they met a white man, and this man invited them to come and visit his home. He was kind of curious. He was asking them questions. So he gave them an invitation, and it was in a place called Smethwick near Birmingham. And on the day that they were going to visit this man, the people saw these two Black men coming along the street, and there were those of them that just turned and just ran. They ran into their houses, they shut the doors, and they were looking out the window at my dad and his friend. My dad couldn't understand, why people were doing this. And it wasn't the only time that he experienced people running away from him. So this was something for him to get used to. He didn't expect this. And then you might be familiar with signs like this that he would have to deal with. Yes, no Irish, no Blacks, no dogs. And I remind the children that, Irish people, as well as Black Caribbean people, were actually invited to Britain after the Second World War, to help Britain. And this is how some people welcome them. But I also say that, of course, not everybody treated them this way. And my dad does say that there are people that did treat him kindly. And of course, he appreciated that. So are things better today? Well, I say, to the children, yes, we don't see signs like this. I say, have you ever seen a sign like this around where you live? And they said, no. Does that mean that things are better? What I say to them is that obviously there are laws, that make certain things illegal. You couldn't put up a sign like that in a bed and breakfast place in Britain today. But does that mean that people's attitudes have changed? Or is it that people just know what to say in public, how to conduct themselves with people of color, but deep down, are there still some of those attitudes still there? And sometimes I give the example that, for example, if a Black person wanted to marry into your family, and I say this because most of the schools we go into are they're majority almost total white, all white. Somebody was to marry into your family, how would that be? A person of color wanted to marry into your family, how would that be received? And sometimes when you get a bit closer, it reveals that there are still underlying issues that are unresolved in terms of the attitude of the majority indigenous people to other cultures. So that's a little bit of what we do in our work in the schools, and just sharing my father's experience. I've got a few moments if anybody has any questions or comments.
Well, thank you so much, Neil. That was fascinating, and your father's interview is really, really interesting. And I hope that we'll be able to post that so that people will be able to listen to the entirety. It's a long interview, it's over an hour, I think, with the two parts of it. But it's really fascinating and really gives an interesting perspective on the experience that colleagues had. When they came over at that time. So thank you very much indeed, Neil. That's absolutely brilliant. And it's great to know that you're working with schools in Wales as well as England, I expect, because in Wales, we're now leading the way, I think, in the UK with work towards actually officially including Black history within the curriculum, which is wonderful. So thank you.
Yes, I'm just putting my details in the chat. So if anybody wants to contact me further, my details are there.
That's really kind of you. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, and thank you for the opportunity. And sorry, I'm going to have to go because I've got a class to teach at 4. Thank you very much.
Again, thanks so much,
then.
Neil.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
Indeed, thank you, thank you. And now we're going to welcome.
Just a moment, reflecting on what Neil just said in his eloquent presentation, in spite of the technical challenges, and reflecting on what Dr. Hickel said, as well as Dr. Lola Ramakan, I think what will be a fitting context to a better understanding of what has transpired, what is transpiring, and what we need to do as of this point, we could easily interject or inject the word colonial before Empire Windrush. So there's a colonial empire Windrush, because we don't want to romanticize the thing to continue the misinformation and miseducation that I think Dr. Hicklin alluded to earlier. So just for a proper understanding from my perspective, colonial empire Windrush is a proper backdrop. Yes, Liz, over to you.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Neil, and thank you, Yasus. Okay, so we're just going to now welcome the National Poet of Wales, Eva Acklin. Eva has been very supportive and has worked with Yasser Safari, myself and other colleagues over the time. So Eva, I think you're just going to say a few words and then we're going to get your video of the poem to show.
Diolch yn fawr iawn am y cyfle I fedru cyfrannu heddiw ac I gefnogi diwrnod Windrush. Thank you for this opportunity to be able to contribute today and to support and to show solidarity with the aims of Windrush Day. The poem that you're about to hear was written for Windrush Day last year at the height of the pandemic. It's dedicated to Anthony Bryan, the late Paulette Wilson, who were just 2 of the Windrush generation who suffered as a result of the UK government's hostile environment policy. It's also dedicated to Amelia Gentleman, whose excellent book, The Windrush Betrayal, certainly opened my eyes to the extent of this scandal, which is still an ongoing scandal. And it might seem counterintuitive, perhaps, to dedicate a poem in the Welsh language to them, but this is a story that needs to be heard in every language, and the video you're about to hear, in case you're worried, does have subtitles. Lastly, as there are now Welsh speakers amongst the children and grandchildren of the Windrush generation here in Wales, I'd also like to dedicate the poem to them. So with no further words than that, I hand you over to Liz, who hopefully is going to press a button and you're going to hear the poem. Okay, diolch yn fawr.
So here's the video of the poem.
Gwyn fy myd wrth osgoi'r aflwydd yn gaeth ac eto ddim wrth droedio 10,000 o gama a gyrion fy nhre. A chenna fy'r hen lwydra a llygyd newydd nes ailafal yn iaith tymhora a medru cyweirio rhwng sgwrs ara y mynydd pell a pharabl sydyn y cloddia. Fy myd. A dim ond drymchyd a denydd cloman i darfu ar fy heddwch. Dyna'n mraint. Ond gall newid amrantiad. Os nid yma ges i'n ngeni na magu mae fyma dwi'n byw efo'n plant honnig. Yn prawf mod i'n Gymro mae fyma dwi wedi gweithio bob un o'r 20 mlynedd dwytha. Ond sneb yn fach herio a iaith front fel yna, felly gwyn fy myd. A diolchaf na chael o'n nadur a cael yn hun mewn sbyty, bod yn stamp wedi dalu ers cyn genny'r sawl sy'n gwaradwn i'r hawl. Diolchaf na chael o'n mi swyddon a'n rhoi allan o'n hyd. Diolchaf na chael o'n alltudio i fina sydd ddim yn fy nghofio. Diolchaf na chael o'n ngharcharu ar gyrion maes awyr gan rei sy'n gwneud celwydd o'n myd. Ond ein byd pan na allwn gerdded o'r tu arall heibio, pan fo'r rhod yn troi yng nghalon pob tre, a rhodiwn hen lwybra a llygyd newydd, cydroedio drwy'r trwch, drwy fwd y geia, nes cerdded hafa newydd yn iaith, nes ailgodi yn amgenach, nes byw mewn lliw. Nid gweld mewn byd a gwyn.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for that, Ivor. You know what is impressive about this, this presentation, and what I take away from it is walking the old path with new eyes. You know, the hope and the aspiration for renewal, for new being, new paradigm of interpretation, new faculty of interpretation, a new way of being. If we can hold each other's hands on the world stage of public opinion, then we'll have done something, and we'll have learned from the Windrush scandal, debacle, disgrace that is ongoing, and against the backdrop of the colonial Windrush and still the reality of a colonial empire that still refused to do justice to the people it has so wronged. Thanks once again. Up yourself, Ivor. Brilliant.
Thank you so much, and you know, that poem also brings so many memories back and respect. Now for the last few years, we've remembered a colleague, Enrico.
My picture as well.
Enrico has been Enrico was an amazing person, and I'd now like to welcome both Professor Robert Moore and also Dr. Jim Thakordin, who both knew Enrico Stennett. Enrico actually came to the UK before Windrush, the year before, and he and we met his second wife, Mary Stennett, and we supported her to make sure that in Wales we remembered Enrico's story, and we have honoured that. And so this is an opportunity to remember Enrico Stennett. Thank you, Professor Moore.
Thank you. I'm just going to say a few words about the beginning and the end, because Jim will talk about the middle of Enrico's life, of which I have little direct knowledge. It does seem to me that Enrico embodied all the gifts that Caribbean migration brought to the United Kingdom. Everything from political and trade union experience to musical talent. He was immensely resourceful, equally comfortable with the elite, notably Josephine Baker and Hewlett Johnson, the Red Dean, and surviving in an environment where the notorious Peter Rackman and his enforcer, Michael Freitas, were exploiting the housing needs of immigrants in London. Enrico's early life in the UK was colourful and potentially hazardous. Now, I first encountered him in the late 1950s. I used to go to Speaker's Corner on Sundays and listen to Donald Soper. Enrico and his comrades were on the next pitch advocating for African liberation. However, I met Enrico when he was a founder trustee of the North Wales Regional Equality Network. He was always wanting us to be more radical. He wanted action, but was always very unspecific about the action he wanted. And I think we may hear more of this when Jim tells us about the middle years. Enrico was so argumentative that he would argue when he agreed with you. And his combative character remained to the end, as I saw when I talked to him shortly before his death. He was expounding his version of Marxism with a vehemence and vigor that was making Mary, his wife, very anxious about the state of his health. Enrico was a man with vision, energy, and intellect. He always made the link between colonial domination and metropolitan racism. To him, they were all of a piece. He would love to have been part of Black Lives Matter and very proud of its young leadership, giving them support and no doubt perpetual earache. So I would like just to end this short intervention by quoting a brief passage from Black Resistance to British Policing, in which Adam Elliott Cooper makes the connection between policing in the colonies and policing the United Kingdom. And this paragraph, I think, expresses much of what Enrico thought about the Commission for Racial Equality, Nuren perhaps, and what he would have thought about current Welsh government initiatives. Though I keep hearing Enrico's voice in much of the response to current Welsh government policy through the voice of the next generation. I think Enrico goes on making a difference. So here's this short passage. Equality and diversity consultancy, implicit bias training, and racial awareness of workshops reduced racism to individual prejudice, privilege, and hatred. The depoliticization of Black politics treated the state and its institutions as a tool for anti-racism, rather than recognizing it to be a significant reproducer of racism. The language of interpersonal prejudice and privilege misrepresents racism as purely an individual matter to be unlearned, educated, or diversified away, rather than racism being a fundamental system of control intrinsic to capitalist exploitation and state power. Targeted funding denudes radical Black politics of its commitment to solidarity, knowledge, and thoughts, and their interaction with friends, colleagues, or members of the public. Today, this has left different communities to compete over resources limited by the state and market capitalism. At its most crass, communities are encouraged to argue over who is the most marginalized or most privileged in order to justify who should be platformed, financed, or centered. I think Enrico would have understood and endorsed every word of that and then argued with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Robert. That was so kind. Now, Jim's connectivity is coming and going. And Jim, I don't know if you can hear me because I cannot see you at the moment. So if it's okay until Jim comes back on, we'll split your session in two, Robert, if that's all right. I'm not sure if Jim's coming back. Did you want to do the end of your session? And then we'll get Jim to do the middle.
Well, I think I had my say. I mean, if you ask me to talk at length on Enrico, you'll be here till dinner time.
Okay, well, I would love to ask you to talk at length about Enrico, and I'm sure there's going to be opportunities in the future. But we'll catch back with Jim when that's working okay. But we did ask Joy Roxburgh. Now, Joy is an award-winning poet from Jamaica. She's based in the UK now, but is a great supporter of Black History Month in North Wales, and her starring appearance as Anansi the Spider has continued to be the talk of Bangor. So Joy, we asked Joy if she would look at the story of Enrico Stennet and to present that in words. So
can't hear.
Joy, if you want to join us. Oh, you're here, are you, Jim? Well, let's just have the poem first and then we'll have you next. Okay? So
okay.
Joy, you. Thanks very
All right. The poem is called Ode to Enrico Stennet. What do you do when you don't belong? What do you do when your skin color's wrong? What do you do when you try to escape but find the same trouble just in a new shape? Let's ask Mr. Enrico Stennet, aka Mr. Magic Feet. Yes, sirree, our Mr. Stennet, never did he miss a beat. First up, he loved to challenge oppression, not by using his fists to fight. Instead, he always sought for solutions when things were not happening right. As a mixed race child, he'd been hurt by racism and knew the harsh sting of unfair criticism. But did he get bitter? Oh no, he did not. He campaigned for others and duly forgot to be held in the chains of his own past and pain. He was a man on a mission with so much to gain. He joined unions and movements, formed a league of his own, and through them became a man of renown, fighting for rights for people here and abroad. With activists all over, he formed common cause. In England, he founded the first Black newspaper. He called it the African Voice. He was astute enough to know that the media was a powerful tool of freedom and choice. Apart from the paper, his voice could often be heard on the street near Hyde Corner, where he issued the word that racist injustice, oppression and strife were not a good thing in anyone's life. But Enrico wasn't all serious. He knew how to have fun. At the close of the day, when campaigning was done, he'd be dancing in nightclubs. He was second to none. That's why he was called Mr. Magic Feet. He could rock to a tune and jive to a beat. Men like Enrico are hard to come by. The world lost an icon when his time came to die. But we celebrate his life and his legacy lives on, and we'll continue his struggle till the battle is won. And of no less important are his wives also gone. Behind every good man, a good woman shone. So here's to Enrico. Please all raise your glasses to the hero who tirelessly fought for the masses. And let us encourage the youth to take note that just like Enrico, they too can vote for a world that is just, equal and fair. Action by action, we'll certainly get there. And that's the end.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Joy. That's just incredible. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
okay.
And really lovely to also recall Mary and her endeavours to make
Can't
sure
see
that.
or hear anybody, I'm sorry.
Now, Jim, if you can switch yourself off on, and over to you. Thanks again, Joy. All
Yes,
right,
you're
Jim.
welcome.
Thank you very much indeed. Jim, are you there? Seem to be having a bit of
Yes, for the
difficulty.
time being, but I'm having problem. My screen goes on and off, so no problem. You have to bear with me. It seems to come on for a couple of minutes and then goes off and then come back on. I'm ready.
All right. Yeah, off you go then, Jim. That's wonderful. Over to you.
Right, thank you. Thank you. I met Enrico in Hyde Park Corner, Speaker's Corner they call it, in London. He was on his soapbox in 1962. First of all, thank you, Liz and Jesus, for inviting me to this program. And I'm happy to contribute and thank you for listening. And so I met Enrico then, and we became friends, close friends. I'm going to quote a little bit about Enrico from Mary, his good wife. And she said, I know I was blessed to have met such a wonderful human being in Enrico Stennett, and even more privileged to have spent so many years of my life with him. I will always remain eternally grateful. He was a gentleman. Mrs. Stennett was one in a million, the likes of which we will never see again. He was a little gem. He was the most lovable man you could ever dream of meeting in your lifetime. He was a charming, sweet, adorable gentleman with kindness in his eyes who endeared you to him. He grew up in a bygone era in a unique, privileged, aristocratic upbringing in Jamaica on the Free Mountain Estate, Mount Horeb. The Free Mountains Estate was which dated back to the time of slavery. The property had been handed down through the generations of Harris, Stennett, and McKinley. So Enrico was quite a character. He grew up in a bygone era in a unique, privileged, aristocratic upbringing in Jamaica on the Free Mountain Estate. The Free Mountain Estate was a large plantation which dated slavery, and the slave owners were white. The property had been through generations of white, and Enrico was born. I don't believe he was born on a plantation, but his mum was a white woman, and she had a relationship with a black Jamaican man, and she was exiled into Kingston, and Enrico spent much of his life in poverty, much of his childhood, assisted by his aunts who helped him out and his poor mum out, who had a dreadful life. He was disliked by the white people for letting the white race down, and he was also disliked by a number of black people who felt that he was neither them nor was he white, and he was a mixed race. He got involved politically from very young. He was in the Jamaican Labour Party and opposed Bustamante. And in fact, in 1942, he wasn't many years old. He was a youngster. And he addressed a meeting in Sabina Park with thousands. Some people said there were 10,000 people at that meeting. So Enrico arrived in London. He claimed, and in his book he wrote, he arrived in 1947. And some people said the Windrush arrived in 1948. There's a number of things about Enrico and his life that is very complex and complicated. He was born into a white family. He grew up his childhood in poverty. He was driven from Jamaica to London because of racism. He came and saw racism in reality in London. He saw racism. He confronted racism. He fought against racism. He was a capitalist for a while, bought up a row of properties in London, And because black people couldn't find jobs, he created jobs for them. In the end, they stole his material, and sold it off, and they damaged his business, and he went bankrupt in the building trade. He joined other organizations. To my surprise, he joined some women's organization, and he volunteered in their office. He was very academic as a youngster with little education. He did the newsletter, he campaigned for them. He joined several political parties. He started off in the Labour Party, and he was a parliamentary candidate, but the Labour Party dropped him when they said, you're a communist, really. You're not the Labour Party, you're a communist. We can't have you as a friend. He then joined the Communist Party. He worked in race relations. And when the Commission for Racial Equality knew that he was a member of the Communist Party, they thought he was an agitator, and they were to employ him. But him as a race advisor, for example, he secured buildings, he secured resources, he secured a lot of things for them. But in the end, it turned very, very bad and sour. They beat him up. There were fellow Jamaicans on drugs. They were appointed. Once he started getting money from the council, Coventry, Wolverhampton, and elsewhere, they wanted more money. They wanted more places where they can drink, gamble, smoke, get involved in all sorts of things. And of course, Enrico was a political person. He wasn't someone who was into samba and music. Although he was well cultured, he became a classical dancer in London, a top dancer, and they made video of him. He was a poet, he was a writer, he wrote for the Caribbean Times, he wrote political speeches for various politicians. I met him at a meeting with Lord Bertram Russell, Lord Boothby, Lord Fenner Brockway, and he mixed in large circles with people who were down in the dumps. He was a character that shaped my life, helped to shape my life as a youngster. I was only 19 when I met him, and we met and became friends. He stayed at my home, I stayed at his home. He was married to an English woman of German origin, had 2 children before we met Mary. When his wife died, Mary was sent by the Labour Exchange. She was only 16 to Enrico's premises, where he got a lot of community organizations from. And she took her national assistance card with her, and Enrico gave her a job. And of course, his wife had died, and he missed female company. And he ended up a very close relationship with Mary, and that eventually became one of very close friends, and they lived together. And Mary spent all their lives, Enrico's rest of his life with him. His 2 children grew up. One wasn't well, and the other one was well, but for some reason they didn't maintain close contact. So Enrico was a great man. Wherever there were problems, he would travel the length and breadth of Britain, and he would help people on strikes, political demonstrations, any injustices that were happening. Enrico would be part of that campaign for just freedom. I wrote a book about Enrico.
All right, that's
to raise money, because Enrico, when he died, in an unmarked grave. And sorry, Liz.
Jim, thank you very much indeed for
that's
sharing.
the book.
It's an excellent story.
To have a lovely headstone for Enrico.
All right, Jim, we're having difficulty with the sound, and your picture keeps freezing. So Jim, thank you very much indeed. Now what you're going to do is you're going to help us by writing a paper that's going to go in the conference pack. So we're really looking forward to that. Thanks ever so much, Jim. You've just got so much that you could say, but we've got other people who we need to move on to. So thanks so much. Show us that other book then.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know.
Enrico
Oh, yes.
book that is available.
Buckramasta Story, Enrico's book. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry we're having all this difficulty with the sound and your picture freezing. So thank you ever so much then. Dr. Jim Thakurin has been such a support to us in North Wales. He spoke last year at length at the Nwami Windrush Day conference. That was a really important event, and it's really great to hear from you, Jim, and thank you very much for all you do, and thank you very much for supporting the Black History Lunchtime Conversations as well. That's absolutely fabulous. Thank you very much indeed. Right, so we asked poets to link up with people who knew the stories of Windrush or were involved in the stories of Windrush, and Joy was able to join us with her poem that she wrote about Enrico Stennett. Now I'm going to ask Abu Bakr Madan Al-Shabazz if you would make your presentation. We asked Rhys Trimble, Dr. Rhys Trimble, to also to work with Abu Bakr as well. So he's going to share his interpretation after Apu's presentation. So over to you, Apu. That's great.
Okay, thank you. Could you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thanks everybody for turning up to this momentum occasion. And I'd like to thank everybody who's made the effort. And I want us just to think about those people we have lost over the few years who couldn't make it. They come over here, they built their foundation. And obviously there are many, many generations that has come away from that. And I'm from I'm a 5 generations, but I'm the 3rd. It was my grandparents which came here first. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just give you a little timeline of looking at those issues here, looking at the different dates of the different types of, conflicts and changes that took place in British society. Because my grandparents, your grandparents, many of them would have been part of this, whether they're black, yellow, red, white, or brown. This needs to be understood. Now, the first thing I want to bring to your attention is the type of hostilities that many of the African Caribbeans, which they would have called themselves West Indians, would have had when they arrived in this country after 1948. Now, there was a proliferation or increase in the amount of immigrant laborers which were coming over to this country to rebuild the infrastructure. And this, I think, is really important for us to know because, the Caribbean islands did not get into contact with the British until approximately 1623, 1624, when they bumped into St. Kitts, took that off the Spanish. Jamaica was taken much later, around about 1655, and a succession of takeovers by the British in the Caribbean islands. So one of the reasons why they asked us to come over here is because we looked after them for over 300 years, and we did a good job. This is why they wanted to maintain the element of the plantocracy or slavery, the slavocracy, all those systems they wanted to maintain within the Caribbean islands. Now, other ventures started taking place as well, because many of the African Caribbeans that came over to this country wouldn't have known one another. They would have heard about one another. So even though Jamaicans were the largest population to come over here, they wouldn't have necessarily known people from Grenada, St. Kitts, Barbados and Trinidad. And the list just goes on, St. Lucia, the list would have gone on. So those cultural differences on the island would have confronted themselves, and they would have had to bind themselves together in order to ensure element of safety and security. And I think one of the missing narratives, which I have tried to push out, is that when the West Indians arrived and came over here, it was a dual working household. This must be emphasized. What I mean by that, Black women worked alongside their men. And they've been doing this for over 400 years. This is really important here. So, because British society at the time was very much a nuclear family. It was a stay-at-home mum, and obviously it was a working dad. This did not exist in the West Indian communities, the African Caribbean communities. And I have to stress this, this is really important narrative, because many sociologists are changing the history to try to say that we were a nuclear family. Many of us who were on here, who were born in this country, rarely saw our parents. And they fought hard to live in, respectable places in order to gain elements of upward mobility. So I just want to look at 3 acts. I'm going to just take you through a little narrative of my family, look at the different generations, and look at the changing face of the West Indian, the African Caribbean, and the British face from the Windrush generation. So the Race Relation Act, which was passed in 1965, was to stop racial segregation in British society. It was not just something that existed in the Americas. We couldn't go to hotels and motels. We couldn't go to restaurants, seaside resorts, and the list just goes on. Even housing was off bounds to a large extent. And then they passed the 1968 Act, the Race Relation Act, which was to allow us to now begin to legally purchase houses, because we brought in what was known as the partner system, where maybe 30, 40, 50, 60 different West Indians from different islands would have pulled their money together in order to get out of the wretched state that they were living in. Because sometimes in many bedsits, as an example, you may have had 6 or 7 men in one little small room with a small little cooker. This was the reality. So there was this passion and drive to make changes. This is the sort of condition they encountered when they come to this country. They were made certain concessions and promises, and those promises and concessions were not fulfilled by the government. And then they started to realize that they weren't as British citizens, or this was not so much the mother country as they were made to believe. Now, this is my grandfather, which is on the left-hand side. He was the original one to come over here in the 1950s. And the reason why, because what happened was in the West Indies at the time, America was asking for cheap labor, because my grandfather came from Jamaica. So he went to the state of Connecticut, and he worked on the plantations there. And this was an annual thing. So many African Caribbeans would have gone to America long before they would have come here. I think this is important to know because of the cheap labor and the way they can exploit things. And because of racial segregation in the United States of America, my grandfather decided he wanted to come here because things were better in Wales. Now, on the right-hand side here is his brother Jasper Reed, R-E-I-D. And they came from the parish of St. Catherine in Jamaica. He came over here, he settled here in a place called Barry, which was Barry Docks. And he said that things were better, slightly better for Black people in Wales than it was in the Americas. And that was the only reason why my grandfather decided to come over here. This is a picture of myself and my father in the mid-1970s. My father came from Blue Mountain. He grew up in St. Thomas. He was brought over here by his mother. So I think this is important. So for me, it was my grandparents originally came here, worked and sent for their children. So she sent for my father to come over here to join her in Gloucester, along with his sister Pearl. And they had a church, ironically, next door to Fred West's house. If you know about Fred West and the House of Horrors, etc., Cromwell Street in Gloucester, there's a church directly next to that, which is a Seventh-day Adventist church. That was my auntie and uncle's church. So there's a bit of historical understanding and legacies that comes about with this type of experience. So what I want to show is the way that we felt as African Caribbeans as African Caribbeans, those of us who were born in this country, the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th generation, we were not allowed to become West Indian. There was a sense of dislocation and identity suspension for us. Our parents would not allow us to become West Indians. Even though they spoke the Jamaican, the Grenadian, those different strong accents, we were not even allowed to speak that, even though that was the only language we knew. So it was very difficult for us to formulate a strong identity with the Caribbean islands. Our parents generally and our grandparents would not allow us. They felt that assimilating into British society was the way forward. And obviously what took place over in British society, we were not allowed to be British. So we had to formulate an identity. Now, there you can see the Jamaican Rude Boys. You see these elements of subcultures coming over here, and they're going to begin to influence British subcultures. So you would have things like the Teddy Boys. You can see the similar sort of dresses of the 1950s who were imitating the Jamaican Rude Boys. So what happened, because many of those came away from that and they started to work, there was high unemployment amongst many of the Teddy Boys. And then they started to hold on to right-wing extremism. This is what started happening. And then you had the likes of the mods, which is modern. So you can see where the dress codes of imitating or replicating the Jamaican Rude Boys was now influencing youth culture within Britain. You also have the skinheads. Before they became right-wing, they were actually influenced by the Jamaican Rude Boys. So what I'm trying to show you here, that elements of cultural diffusion started to take place in many of the working class inner city areas of England and Wales. So you had the punks. This was influenced by reggae in the 1970s. So what you're starting to see now is this amalgamation, this synthesis of culture, where working class whites who are now living with African Caribbeans, those of us who were second or third generation growing up, who were trying to hold on to our cultures and trying to spread those cultures in the cities, because we were looking for acceptance. So these are the sort of things I want us to reflect on, the type of hostilities each generation had, whether they were from the Caribbean to the British Isles, or those of us who were born here. And obviously you got the B-boys and the B-girls. This came out in the late 1970s. Most of you know about Kool Herc. He was a Jamaican DJ, and he was the founder of what we now call rap music. And before that, it was called hip hop. So what you're seeing is that a lot of immigration is taking place into the two major Western worlds of America and Britain, and they're influencing subcultures which are still with us today. And I think this is some of the important factors. We need to look at those groups of people who were born in the Western world, and they saw that culture diffuse into something which is quite unique. So these are just some images I just want to show you. Like I said, my grandfather came originally, then my grandmother, she was a midwife. My grandmother, this one here, who was Enid Reed. Her name was Enid Matthews. She grew up in the parish of St. Catherine. And these are the three daughters. This is my Auntie Salva, my mother, Cephlin, and my Auntie Paulette, who now lives in Luton. She lives in Nottingham. And this one, Salva, lives in London, in Tottenham area. So what you're seeing there, you're seeing a proud man who could not read or write, who actually worked hard, and he sent for his wife and his 6 children. And I think this is really important, because they were underpaid and they were exploited. Many of them only wanted to come over here for a few years and to go back. But because they were stratified within society and they were not allowed to earn as much as their white counterparts, they struggled. And I think this is a narrative that needs to be acknowledged and recognized, of the turmoils and the struggles and the hostilities that they went through. And what is unique about these generations is that the Black women helped and worked alongside their men. And this is something which is part of the Caribbean history since the enslavement period, when Christopher Columbus had so-called founded the so-called Caribbean islands, exterminated the Taínos and the Arawaks, etc., and bringing about that slavocracy in the so-called Caribbean islands. So these are just some of the things I want us to reflect on. So this is the second generation coming over now. I was born in the 1960s. So those of us who were born in this country, most of us know about this Grenadian scholar. He was a teacher that worked in this country. And what they were trying to label Black children who were born in this country to be educationally subnormal. So there started to become a conflict of interest, to a large extent, of us who were born in this country and the educational system, which is still with us today. Now they just expel us. There was this attitude in the Caribbean islands of not training or educating the darker races amongst the so-called West Indians. It was mainly the lighter skinned people who was going to take over the country and go into those high level elements of the professions on those different islands. So this is what started happening. They wanted to undereducate us because there was this belief in British society that we were going, we had a lot of rights, more rights than our parents, because we were born here, you know, about the different scandals. There's immigration checks and all types of things that was taking place with many of them. So many of them started to legalize themselves within the country. No, they were going to stay here. Many of them could not go back because they were poorly paid. But one thing we must admire about these people, they were able to pull their money together and buy houses. They are more successful, the West Indian or the Windrush generation that came over here to buy houses than us who were born in this country. Many of us are living in social housing. How did they do that? They were paid less than us and they were in menial types of jobs, but they were able to crystallize a dream and a vision in order for their families to grow up into a convivial household in which they can be proud of. And this is something I think is really important for us to know, because they would never have been able to have that money and build homes back in Jamaica or Grenada or Trinidad or St. Lucia or Barbados or whatever islands were actually out there. So I think this is a really important thing to look at the struggles that many of our parents and grandparents would have went. Many children were left behind. My father left my two siblings, my older brother and sister. They never rejoined here. This was a reality. And my grandmother, who had two children previously, she left them over there, but they were much older. They already had children. But in my grandfather, she had 6 children with. All of those children came here. He wanted to make sure of that. Even though he struggled, he managed to crystallize that into something meaningful. Education in my family and amongst most West Indians at the time was really important. There was a slogan they would teach us: we must work twice as harder than the white man to be seen on the same level as them. And this is something that we can all relate to, whether we were back in the Caribbean islands or we were back here within Britain. So these are just some of the images of families which have come over. There's my grandfather, his 75th birthday. This was in the 90s, this was around about 1995. He was born in 1919. My grandmother was born in 1920. They were the ones who come over here in the late 50s, early 1960s, sent for 6 of their children who joined them in the Barry area of Wales. So you can see how exogamy, miscegenation, what I mean by that, interracial marriage is now going to become a pattern. And what we're going to see over the years with many African Caribbean or West Indian families, where the skin tones are going to become lighter and lighter as a result of that intermixing and that interbreeding, which is a reality in the 21st century. It's also a reality in the Caribbean, which sometimes people forget. So there's just an image of my grandfather here with his son who was born in Jamaica, Joseph, who now lives in Bristol, and my Uncle Michael Reed. So this was at the wedding day. So you're seeing different things that started to happen. So many of us were born in this country, we're developing. These are just my cousins. This is my Uncle Joseph there and his wife. She runs a restaurant in St. Nicholas in Bristol, a Jamaican restaurant. You know, you can see some of my cousins there who quite like. Their mother was white. My Uncle Jasper came over here, which is there. And obviously he married, because many Black women didn't come at that time. This must be realized. So there's elements of, you know, collaboration, mixing, which is taking place. And unfortunately, as many large families are concerned, you know, we would only seem to be seeing each other during weddings or funerals or christenings. And, you know, so this has now become the reality of the average West Indian or African Caribbean home. And just to finish off, we're just going to be looking at a few more other images. This is my first cousin here, a daughter and her granddaughter. So you can actually see how you can still see the Africoid phenotypical traits within the white skin. But this is the reality of the Reed family, you know, the Anderson family, the McLagan family. They're all from the same roots, which moved to the UK because many of my grandmother's cousins and my grandfather's cousins accompanied them here. Many went to Birmingham and Liverpool. Many of them changed their names. There was conflict. Many of those families you don't know, but we're able to trace some of those family members because some of the children or the grandchildren of the, you know, 2nd or 3rd generation are now inquisitive to find out who they are and where their family members are. And this is just how the family, this is like the 5th generation. You can see how they're getting lighter. The Celtic look is, becoming prevalent. You got the phenotypical, the curly hair, which is red or ginger, the blonde hair starting to come through. So these are just some of the things I just wanted to emphasize, looking at the ways in which the generations that came over here who built that foundation, who built something within us in order to try to become proud of who we were as individuals. But they wanted us to form our own type of identity, away from the so-called West Indies, to become more British. And the British are telling us we are not quite British. However, with culture diffusion and subcultures running on the backs of the Caribbean culture of the Rude Boys and Rastafari, which was one of the main philosophies that gave us our Africanity, because the West Indians did not want to have hardly anything or nothing to do with Africa. It was Rastafari that gave us that identity. When Bob Marley, or when the Wailers rather, came over in the early 70s and gave us that perception to project a vision of Africa, us being African, and we changing our identity to African Caribbean. We are Africans from the Caribbean, even if we live in the so-called diaspora. So these are just other pictures of other family members, my Uncle Jasper's family, So all I just basically wanted to share with you is looking at the different types of family structures, family functions, looking at the different types of visions that many families would have had, which many of your own parents and grandparents would have shared. Many of those children were left behind, never to join their parents in this country. That's a sad reality that needs to come out. And many brothers and sisters who were born at different opposite ends of the Atlantic still haven't solidified relationships. But with social media, etc., things are slowly starting to change. So I'll leave it there. And I hope that I've crystallized the essence of 5 generations of West Indians to African Caribbeans to British Blacks in the 21st century. Thank you very much.
Well, wow, that's fantastic. Looking at the rest of the photos as well. So Yassis, I'm going to bring you in here. Yassis, so far right? Wow, amazing.
But we continue the hand clapping for a bit extended, but brilliant. Very brilliant, very detailed as well. And the next person in this segment is a colleague and fellow in good works, I would like to say, deserving of an extended introduction, but in the interest of time, we really have for another time. We met at the Marley Key when we did a presentation with Richard Douglas Pennant, and that was maybe over a decade ago. I brought him to Jamaica, and he did a successful presentation at Poetry in Motion that is still being talked about. So without any more words, which I'd really love to say a bit more about this gentleman who is an expert poet that specializes in medieval and experimental poetry. I like to call him the poet with the stick. And we'd want us to be prepared, fasten your seatbelt for the one and only Dr. Reese Trimble.
Thanks, Yassis. Yeah. So Liz asked me to write a poem, and it's my great privilege to speak to you. So I started writing it, and then I decided I wanted some help. So I had a lovely conversation with Abu Bakr, and I used his voice and lots of other voices to create this poem. So I warn you, my style is like, it's more like, say, Kamau Braithwaite, who's experimental Barbadian poet, than Miss Lou. So I've dropped the poem in the chat, so you can look at that. Maybe it'll help you to understand this kind of collage poetry I do, but I'll just dive right in. Windrush. Wind, et lang, elsewhere to hear. Kiss up, sugar the question, got it assuage that all is made. Only tributary to Thames, Thames, Och, Ephra, Bolo, pang of empire, subjunct from a prize of war. Peng, 804, dream on, out of me yard, 492, make me, I tell you, Blom and Voss, I and I. Steel, doppy, symbol, blad, meshman, downpressed, salt, ire, fish and chip, and regiment, pardon us, sis, black is spectrum of carnivale, Carib, hanging gardens of Kew, cross brook to dream's edge, from summer land. Baby, 1948 to 50, covert song, lone term, but you love behind the plantocracy, we bloodstream the public controversies. Signage, whitelist, gotta recreate the scream, essence equals takeover, work and work, dream on, fill gaps until superordinate became lover's rock. Over Sawyer, twice toned, out and class, raise, race, love, mapless, Torah, gotta, make up for time, Ilan, island riots and toast voice, sound systema, transformatory song, emasculating lifetimes, revisionist, halo, tempting, tender, 1977, ducking equation, recreate, meant, implicate, you, democracies, mute, love take off like verse, why England, rush, rush.
Wow.
And the ending shows that Dr. Reese Trimble's unpredictable, innovative, creative, always different. Let's hear it again.
Well, thank you. And thank you for that wonderfully creative partnership with Apobaga as well. Thank you so much, Reese. Thank you.
Thanks for listening.
And you've on many occasions worked with us and
interesting.
And always very interesting.
People say that.
No, seriously.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Apobaga as well, and a fascinating reflection of the generations there, the 5 generations that we have now in what we call the Windrush generations, and also Apobaga's reference to the importance of Rastafari as part of the story of Windrush, and yet that's not anything that we've really perhaps reflected on before. So very interesting indeed, and thank you very much indeed. Apobaga and myself have had quite a few conversations to get to this point, and it's marvelous. Thank you very, very much indeed.
And the influence of Rastafari and by attendant to Rastafari to the reggae music and other elements of the culture speaks to the fulfillment of the prophecy of Miss Lou, colonization in reverse. And so it's a kind of fuel and an energy for the African liberation and the human redemption and healing that we strive for and continue to do.
Right, okay, so I think we've got more to do on this, haven't we? All right. Now I'm going to ask Karen, who's been very patient, Karen Cross, who's a member of our North Wales Jamaica Society, and I'm now going to attempt to share the screen and get the picture that you want, so you can see all the things that I've got around and about at the minute. I think it features somewhere. I apologise for this. It comes here, I think. No, I've managed to go back to, no, definitely not that one. No, Karen, I'm failing here. Okay. What's the best thing to do? Do you want me to carry on searching, or shall I go?
I'll start talking while you search.
Okay, I do apologise. Okay. And just to say, this was the poetry that Reese presented just, so he put that link for this, but we'll be putting that in the conference papers as well with a bit of an outline there. I'm just going to stop the sharing. I'm so sorry, Karen. I
Okay.
will endeavour to find it and be able to show it more efficiently in a moment. So Karen, thank you so much. Your father was a well, you tell us the story, please.
Well, I don't really know how to follow the fantastic speakers that we've already had. I've enjoyed it very much, and I was asked to speak about my father, and thank you for that. And it's quite poignant because it's Father's Day today, so thinking about him. I hope you find it interesting. It's just a very quick whistle-stop tour of his life. But you know, I could talk about him for hours. My dad's name was Granville Earl Mullings. He was born and grew up in Mandeville in the parish of Manchester in Jamaica. He was born in 1925. He was the youngest of 4 children, and due to the death of his mother when he was quite young, they played a big part in his upbringing. His initials being GEM, he was known affectionately in the family as Jem. In 1944, he decided to join the RAF and moved to England, what he called the mother country. So his journey to England, he had to go to America first. I believe that's where they signed up. And then he travelled by ship to England. He left behind his father, his 2 sisters and his brother back home in Jamaica. His first posting when he came to the UK was in Yorkshire. It's now known as RAF Filey, but in those days it was RAF Human B. Moore. When telling people his name when he arrived, Jem, it was an unusual name, and it sort of became Jim. And then to his closest friends and to people that he liked, he became Jimmy. So he was always known locally here in North Wales as Jimmy, and he was well known. During his time in the RAF, he had no contact with his family. He just went back once in 1949. I believe that was when his father had died. And his next contact with his family was in 1983. He then found out that one of his sisters actually lived in England. She lived in Nottingham. So he kept in touch with the family then. And in 1999, he went back to Jamaica for one last visit. He was quite a character, quite strong, had very good values and morals, and he brought us up well. At his first RAF posting back in Yorkshire, the job he was given was delivering coal to the billets. He wasn't happy with this, and one day he decided he'd had enough of it, and he didn't get up, he just stayed in bed. His commanding officer went to see him in bed, and he asked him why he was refusing to get up. To which he replied, "I didn't come here to deliver coal. I came here to do something more worthwhile." At this, his commanding officer gave him a job as a storeman in supply wing, known in the RAF as supplies. And he stayed in supply wing for the duration of his RAF service, which was 27 years. His next posting was to RAF Bridgenorth in Shropshire. And from there, with his mates, he would go for nights out to Manchester. And that's where he met and married my mum. My mum's name is Gwyneth. She's known as Gwen. They were married in 1949, and I am one of their 3 children. I have 2 older brothers, Morris and Keith. So the photographs you can see, in the middle is Jimmy, and then Jimmy and Gwen sitting on the bed. That's when they went back to Jamaica for a visit in 1999. And then the children, my brothers Morris, Keith, and me as a baby in the middle. They still treat me as a baby. During his time in the RAF, he had many postings, both in the UK and also abroad. We moved around with him to his postings, which included Germany, Iraq, Ireland, Singapore and Cyprus. And the final posting was to RAF Valley, which is in North Wales, and that was in 1965. After spending 2 years at RAF Valley, his next posting came up, and it was to be an unaccompanied tour to Oman. He didn't want to go, and so he decided to leave the RAF. He thought his 27 years was enough. So this started a new chapter in his life, and he became a businessman. His first business was a fish and chip shop, which he ran in Anglesey. He ran it very well, and everybody knew Jimmy. Everybody came from miles around for their fish and chips. Always the entrepreneur, he moved on, and over the years, he ran several more shops. He ran a restaurant, and he also ran a pub. His interest and his hobby was antiques and collectibles. And he was always in trouble with my mum for arriving home with what she would term a box of rubbish. But he would prove her wrong. He would always manage to sell the so-called rubbish for more than he had paid for them. His last business before deciding to retire in 1991 was the Hidden House in Beaumaris. That's in North Wales. A tiny little antique and collector's shop, which he loved. He was in his element there. He decided to retire in 1991 and helped me really with my children. One particular upsetting time for my dad was in 1989, when he had to register for British nationality. He felt it was wrong, especially after serving in the RAF for 27 years, his subsequent businesses, and the active role that he had played in the community. He expressed his extreme dissatisfaction to anyone that would listen to him. Even if you didn't want to, you had to hear all about it. That included writing to Neil Kinnock, who at that time was the MP for Anglesey. However, despite all his protests, he was still advised by the Home Office that he had to carry out this registration, which he did grudgingly and never forgot how much it cost him. I believe it was something like £39. He never ever let it go. Anglesey had become his home. He played golf every day, which kept him fit. His happiest times would be when the family had a get-together at his house. He took great pride in his children, his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren. He loved nothing more than to spend time with them all in the garden, and he had many happy times there. He was diagnosed with dementia, and so life was difficult for him at the end, and he passed away in January 2014, but he's remembered fondly. And that's my whistle-stop tour of Dad's life, and I hope you found it a little bit interesting. Thank you.
Oh, that was fascinating, Karen. Thank you so much. I did find your pictures at last. Thank you so much. It's just beautiful, beautiful. Okay, well, thank you. Now, it's really interesting to me. For many of our stories, I've done the research beforehand, talking with you. But Karen, that was a new story for me. So that was fascinating and so important that we recognise members of the Windrush generation from across Wales, because our colleagues are here from the South Wales Jamaica Society, and in South Wales, obviously the population has a different composition, and we hear stories from there. So it's really lovely that the North Wales Jamaica Society, of which you're an active member, is able to recognise and value your dad's life. And also, please send our very, very good wishes to your mum. And in different circumstances, perhaps your mum might have been with you, but I know how difficult it is at the moment to get from place to place, but really, really good wishes to your mum. It's really lovely. So now I'm going to ask Natalie Fagan-Brown, our chairman of, well, no, not chairman. Anyway, you're the really important person of the North Wales Jamaica Society and also a poet. So we're going to ask Natalie if you'd share one of your poems, and then we'll start the wrap up, because this has just been an amazing event and we've involved so many people, and obviously that's taken our time. So over to you, Natalie.
Good afternoon again, everyone. I thought, because I've always had the Windrush experience with me was basically from Jamaican end. You know what your parents and those around you in Jamaica felt about those who had migrated, or about, what they'd heard about the situation. So this poem, Matty's Letter, is basically for one of those left behind. Mary, me dear, me just get Matty letter. So she and James are settled in England. A Joyce big boy did see the advertisement, said the motherland need we. I would have go with them if I could have find the passage. But Smaddy need for turn a yard for help mama. She said she training to become a nurse, and James driving the buses. She make it all sound so nice. But Mass Ferdy boy last up there too, and him a paint one whole different picture. Him say him couldn't find a place to live. The people them put up signs say no dogs, no blacks, no Irish. What a thing do, Mary? When somebody call you for help them out fix up them place, and then turn round and tell you that you and dog are quabs. But if I saw them treat them one, me no know what me expect. Last say, him and some man rent a place from a man, and them take shift sleep in the bed. One set sleep when the other set gonna work. Mary girl, you know see me escape this crosses. Mary, you remember how the 24th of May, all of we dress up like puss back foot to go put them on the Empire Windrush? Look how them did look nice. Look how them did look sharp. How the hell King George couldn't recognize, said them British? Paul Albert Brown, who did this fight for king and country. How the heck him not British no more? How the British people no love him and celebrate him as them hero? But Mary Mrs., the way them a grumble, it look like them want to build back their own empire themselves. But me glad for Matty and James. They seem to be doing well. Cause she sent a little something for me and mama in the letter, since she never say a word at all about them suffering that last him seem to be facing. I just think it must be because Puss and Dog no have the same luck. If she say she happy, me not say a thing. While she no make England broke her back, or have her a sleep on dog, me not tell mama not a word about what me hear. But all in all, Mary, me glad me stay, cause Darius party would have missed me, and I would have never meet Percy and his handsome self. The end.
Thank you. I love the bit
Liz.
about being dressed up to Busfoot.
And Liz, after that presentation, man, Natalie, get used to it. Say the word, chairwoman.
Chairwoman.
I don't mind chairperson. I don't mind chairperson.
From the North Wales Jamaica Society, we're a chairman, woman, auntie, granny, grandpitney, the brilliant Natalie Fagan-Brown.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank
well,
you.
Okay, well, thanks so much, Natalie. Now, next Sunday afternoon, because we've had such a good time this time, next Sunday afternoon, we're going to invite all our poets to join us to record a special tribute to our Windrush colleagues and friends and families. So that's going to be through the Getty I Windrush Words project that we've been involved in. we've been able to generate quite a lot of poetry. And there's also some other very interesting poetry that we might share from Caribbean poets. So I think, yes, is there anything else that you want to add before I say the list of thank yous?
Well, we have a full 2 hours really. It was a good experience. Thanks for all the presentation, putting things in context and trying to build bridges to move things forward. We have a very special Father's Day special today, called the Plain and Simple Father's Day special, with myself and my 9-year-old daughter. We just have a song out called Plain and Simple and a video, and we now have a special being aired today by mytelefy.tv, mytelefy.tv. It will be up as of today and for the rest of the year. You can check that out, and feel free to stay tuned for the 11th annual staging of Jamaica Poetry Festival. And for you people in the UK, you'll be delighted that we'll be presenting the one and only Linton Kwesi Johnson, as well as Ernest Simit, Dr. Velma Pollard, as well as poets from Africa, Brazil, and the whole work. So good vibes, great day. Reese, don't forget, we have your lineup to Jamaica Poetry Festival next year.
I'll be there.
I think you're also trying to line up Evo up.
Yes, yes. Have been trying to do that for years, but we finally get in there.
I think so. So thank you very much, Yasser. So I'm just going to roll around the thank yous because it really has been really quite special, and I can't tell you personally how much I appreciate the fact that you all rallied round and we got this wonderful annual conference off the ground. So thanks go first of all to Dr. Lola Ramakan for looking so absolutely gorgeous. I can say that. You really do look good, oh dear.
You should leave that to me, Liz, but it's okay.
Right then, you and thanks, please pass our thanks to your husband, His Excellency Seth George Ramakan, for his ongoing support, amazing support we've had from both of you. Thank you so much. So thank him for his message. That was really profound. And that message will also go into the conference papers. So if you can let me have a copy, that will be great. And also thank you to our presenters. We've had Dr. Hilary Robertson Hickling and great memories of Professor Fred Hickling, her husband, who passed sadly a short while ago, and their wonderful work. And Hilary is continuing to work with us on exploring the stories of those left behind. Also, great thanks go to Neil and Levi Lawrence. Neil for the presentation, fascinating, so that we could hear more about his dad, Daniel. And here's a wish to pass on our very best regards to their mother, who's still living in Birmingham. Also, diolch yn fawr to our Welsh national poet, Ivo Rhaglen, most kind, and he's really presented that poem in a video format bilingually, so that we can explore ways
compared to 300 before.
Who's chatting away at the moment? Can't
Can
see.
we mute
Sorry.
Dr.
Yeah,
Ramakan?
That's fine. So also thanks go to Professor Robert Moore from the North Wales Regional Equality Network, NUREN, and to Dr. Jim Thacordin, as well as JCDC award-winning poet Joy Roxburgh. And you all focused on memories of the life and times of Enrico Stennett, and also in memory of Mary Stennett. So that was really beautiful. And thanks to Dr. Abu Bakr, Madam Al-Shabazz. Thank you very much indeed for the research that you put into making that presentation. That was fabulous. And thank you very much to Dr. Reese Trimble for that amazing poem. That was just great. I just love the liveliness of it all and the punchiness. Well done. And thank you very much to Karen for telling us about her dad, Jimmy. And Karen, please pass our best regards on to your mum as well. And we need to remember those mums as well as remember fathers on Father's Day. So I'm not quite sure if I've missed anybody out. And Natalie, thank you so much indeed for sharing that poem. It was really lovely. And we've got such talent within us. But a special big thank you go to Yasser Safari for joining us today. I'm very grateful, and it was wonderful that you were able to co-host with me. We've worked together for over 10 years now, and I have to say it gives me great strength to be able to work with you, and I thank you very much indeed. Yasser, would you like to wrap things up for us then, please?
Well, yes. What can I say? It was really a good morning for me here. Maybe afternoon, night for you at other places. It reminds us that we are living in a global village, and it still takes a village to raise a child and to raise adults and to bring us together in one. And reflecting on the Windrush experience and thinking about United Kingdom, let us as poets and intellectual people look at those words, United Kingdom. We want to say that every colonial king is dumb and every colonial queen is dumb.
It's funny.
And so we need to transform the triangle of death and genocide and decay to one of healing, reconciliation, renewal, caring, sharing. We have an opportunity to leave a better world for posterity. And so we must find a way to hold hands, look after each other, because the future of humanity, especially in this day and age of technological advancement and strifes and war, is crystal clear. Collective survival or collective extinction. And in that connection, we don't have the luxury of choice. So we need to urgently find a way so we can peacefully coexist on our shared planet Earth with our shared history, our shared existence, and our shared future. I think we can do this. We just have to start by being better human beings to ourselves, and better human beings to our families, to our children, to our neighbors. We are no different, irrespective of the superficiality of skin color. We breathe the same breath of life. We inhabit one planet. We are members of one human family. We have a shared co-related existence, and we have a shared future. We profess an advanced civilization. Let us add substance to that profession and that claim. Let us improve our relationships, love each other, look after each other, be just and true to yourselves and to each other, and we'll have a much improved human community of one earth, one love, and one humanity. May the Almighty, our ancestors, our energies, our effort, our intellectual capabilities aid us and abet us in achieving that noble objective. Honor, love, and prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you, Yasser, and thank you to everyone. And I'll get the recording off now. Thank you so much, everyone.